The gentle rocking of the train usually lulled me into a peaceful state. But that night, exhaustion had dragged me under like quicksand. 3 consecutive night shifts at St. Mary's Hospital had left me hollow, my scrubs still faintly smelling of antiseptic and other people's pain. I remember checking my watch, 11:42 p.m., before my eyelids surrendered to gravity, my head finding support against the cold window as suburban Chicago blurred into darkness outside. I hadn't meant to fall asleep, not on the last train of the night, not when I lived in that part of town where streetlights flickered more than they shone, not when my tiny apartment waited for me, empty except for the stack of overdue bills on the kitchen counter. The memory fragments after that, the train's brakes squealing, someone saying my name, the weight of unfamiliar hands on my shoulders. Had I shown my ID to someone? Had I spoken? The gap in my memory gaped like an open wound. When consciousness returned, it arrived with the disorienting sensation of sinking into clouds. My body was cradled in softness so complete it felt alien. The sheets against my skin weren't the rough cotton I owned, but something that flowed like cool water. I breathed in and caught unfamiliar scents. Sandalwood, leather, and something sharper beneath, like metal or gunpowder. My eyes flew open. The ceiling above me stretched endlessly, pristine white with intricate crown molding framing the edges. Not my water-stained rental ceiling. Not any ceiling I recognized. Panic rose in my throat as I bolted upright, the silk sheets pooling around my waist. I wore a nightgown of pale blue silk that wasn't mine, delicate lace tracing the neckline. My nurse's uniform was nowhere to be seen. My fingertips trembled as they traced the unfamiliar fabric, wondering who had changed my clothes, whose hands had touched my unconscious body. That's when I saw it, catching the morning light that streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. A ring on my left hand, a diamond so large it seemed to have its own gravity, flanked by sapphires that matched the blue of the nightgown. The weight of it felt foreign, threatening. "You're awake." The voice came from the doorway, low, smooth, with an accent I couldn't place, something Eastern European layered over perfect English. I turned toward it, and my breath caught in my throat. He stood like he owned not just the room, but the air inside it. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my annual salary, dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on the cover of a magazine. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw dusted with stubble, and eyes the color of smoke, but it was the stillness that radiated from him that made my skin prickle with warning. The careful, predatory stillness of someone who never needed to rush. Behind him, just visible in the hallway, stood a man with the unmistakable build of security, earpiece, impassive expression, and the telltale bulge of a weapon under his jacket. "Where am I?" My voice emerged as a whisper. "Who are you?" He stepped into the room, and I instinctively pulled the sheets higher. His eyes, cold, assessing, noticed the movement, and something like amusement flickered across his face. "My name is Alexei Volkov, and you, Elena Weaver, are in my home." He moved closer, each step measured and deliberate. "You don't remember last night?" "Last night. The train. The darkness. Nothing." "No," I managed, my throat dry. "I don't know how I got here. I don't know why I'm wearing this." I raised my left hand, the diamond catching the light, throwing rainbows against the wall. "I don't know what this means." He sat on the edge of the bed, and the mattress barely dipped under his weight. This close, I could smell his cologne. Expensive, subtle, with notes of cedar and something darker beneath. His proximity sent electricity racing across my skin. "It means," he said softly, reaching out to touch the ring, his fingers brushing mine, "that you are under my protection now." Protection. The word held a weight that made my stomach clench. "I don't need protection," I said, pulling my hand away. "I need to go home. I have a shift at the hospital tonight." His smile never reached his eyes. "You no longer work at that hospital, Elena. I've arranged everything. Your resignation has been submitted. Your apartment has been cleared out. Your life, as it was, is over." The casual way he dismantled my existence sent ice through my veins. "You can't do that. That's kidnapping. That's illegal." "Is it kidnapping when you agreed? When you signed the papers yourself?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document, placing it beside me on the silk sheets. Your signature is quite distinctive. Those loops in your E's. I grabbed the paper, my hands shaking. There it was, a marriage license with my signature beside his. But I had no memory of signing anything. This isn't real, I whispered. I would never. You were quite emphatic about it, actually, he said, standing again. After I helped you off the train, after you told me about your father's debts. My father? The mention of him sent a fresh wave of confusion through me. Dad had died 6 months ago, leaving behind nothing but gambling debts I was slowly trying to pay off. What does my father have to do with this? Alexei's expression hardened slightly. Edward Weaver borrowed a significant sum from me 3 years ago. He lost it all at the tables, as expected. I've been watching you since then, waiting. Waiting for what? The question escaped before I could stop it. For you to finish your nursing degree. For you to establish yourself. I don't collect on debts aimlessly, Elena. He spoke as if explaining something simple to a child. I watched you work those double shifts. Watched you cry in your car between jobs. Watched you send money to cover your father's debts without understanding who truly owned them. Horror crawled up my spine as the implications settled over me. This stranger had been monitoring me, following me, for years. Those weren't his gambling debts I was paying. Some were. The most pressing ones belonged to me. He adjusted his cufflinks, platinum I noticed, with tiny diamonds catching the light. Last night, you fell asleep on the train. I happened to be there. You were vulnerable, alone. I brought you to safety. And dressed me in clothes I don't own? Put a ring on my finger I didn't choose? My voice rose, panic edging into it. That's not safety. That's business. He cut in, his voice cooling several degrees. Your father owed me $3 million, Elena. You can work as a nurse for 40 years and never come close to paying that. Or, he gestured to the room, to the ring. You can honor a different arrangement. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. $3 million. The number was astronomical, impossible. What kind of arrangement? I asked, though something deep in my gut already knew. Marriage. 1 year, minimum. You live here. Accompany me when required. Play the role of devoted wife. His eyes traveled over me, not lasciviously but calculatingly, as if assessing a possession. In return, your father's debt is erased. You'll want for nothing. And if I refuse? If I walk out that door right now? Something dangerous flickered in his gaze. The debt transfers fully to you. I'll take everything you have, which isn't much. Then I'll take what you don't have yet. Your future earnings, your professional license, any chance at a normal life. Your father made certain arrangements before his death to ensure his obligations would transfer to you. I stared at the ring on my finger, at this stranger who claimed ownership over me through financial chains I hadn't even known existed. The walls of this luxurious room suddenly felt like prison bars gilded in gold. You drugged me, I said, the realization dawning. On the train. That's why I don't remember anything. Alexei's expression remained impassive. You were exhausted. You fell asleep. When I woke you, you were confused. Suggestible. I took advantage of that state, yes. But no drugs, Elena. I don't need such crude methods. A knock at the door interrupted us. Another man in a dark suit appeared, whispering something in what sounded like Russian. Alexei nodded, then turned back to me. I have business to attend to. Katya will help you dress. We have a lunch engagement at 1, your first public appearance as my fiancé. He moved toward the door, then paused. Don't try to leave. This entire property is secured. For your protection, of course. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a vault ceiling. Seconds later, a petite blonde woman entered, her expression professionally blank. Good morning, Miss Weaver, she said, her accent similar to Alexei's. I've prepared your clothing for today. Would you like to shower first? I pulled the unfamiliar sheets around me like armor. I want my own clothes, my phone. I need to call someone. Katya's expression didn't change. Your old possessions have been disposed of. Mr. Volkov has provided a new wardrobe, new phone, new everything. She gestured toward a door I assumed led to a bathroom. The shower has excellent water pressure. I recommend you use it. Left with no immediate alternative, I slid out of the bed, the cool marble floor shocking against my bare feet. The bathroom was larger than my entire apartment had been, all white marble and gold fixtures. As hot water pounded against my skin, I frantically tried to piece together what had happened, how my life had unraveled so completely in the span of a single train ride. The mirror revealed a pale, frightened version of myself, dark circles under brown eyes, blonde hair hanging limply around a face that looked younger than my 27 years. The woman staring back at me seemed like a stranger, as unfamiliar as the diamond weighing down my left hand. One thing became clear as I dressed in clothes I'd never bought: a cream cashmere sweater, designer jeans that fit perfectly, boots that cost more than a month's rent. I needed to escape. I needed to find proof of what Alexei had done, how he'd manipulated me into this situation. I needed allies. But as I emerged from the bathroom, to find Katya waiting patiently, as she led me through hallways where security personnel stood at regular intervals, as I glimpsed the grounds outside. Manicured gardens surrounded by high walls, topped with security cameras. The magnitude of my imprisonment settled over me like a shroud. I wasn't just in the Mafia boss's bed. I was in his world now, and every exit appeared to be sealed. The car that carried us to lunch was a sleek black Mercedes with windows so darkly tinted they seemed to absorb light. I sat rigidly beside Alexei in the back seat, a careful foot of space between us that felt both too much and not nearly enough. His driver, a broad-shouldered man who hadn't spoken a word, navigated through Chicago's downtown streets, while another suited man rode in the passenger seat, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. Your security is extensive, I said, breaking the silence that had stretched between us since leaving the mansion. Alexei's gaze shifted from his phone to me. Necessary precautions. Against what? His lips curved slightly. Against those who would take what's mine. The possessive word sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. I'm not yours. The ring on your finger suggests otherwise. He reached across the space between us, his fingers capturing my left hand with unexpected gentleness. His thumb traced over the enormous diamond. This belonged to my grandmother. She survived the siege of Leningrad wearing it sewn inside her coat. Family is everything to me, Elena. The intimate gesture, the story behind the ring, created a dangerous moment of connection I couldn't afford. I pulled my hand away. We're not family. We're a business arrangement, according to you. Something darkened in his gaze. Business and family are often the same in my world. The restaurant was clearly exclusive. No visible name on the Art Deco facade. Just a discreet golden door where a host immediately recognized Alexei and ushered us past waiting patrons to a private room in the back. The space was intimate, with just one table centered beneath a crystal chandelier, the walls lined with wine bottles behind glass. Your usual table, Mr. Volkov, the host murmured, pulling out my chair. I sank into the plush velvet seat, hyper-aware of the ring weighing down my finger, of the eyes that had followed us through the restaurant, curious, respectful, afraid. Whoever Alexei was, these people knew him, deferred to him. You come here often, I observed as a waiter silently poured water into crystal glasses. I own it. He didn't say it with pride or arrogance, just simple fact. As I own several businesses throughout the city, legitimate enterprises before you ask. I doubted anything about this man was truly legitimate. What exactly do you do, Alexei? Imports, exports, real estate, private lending. His eyes held mine. Your father primarily benefited from the latter. The mention of my father sent a fresh wave of confusion through me. Dad had been a history professor with a gambling problem he'd hidden until it consumed him. I still don't understand how he got involved with someone like you. Someone like me, Alexei repeated, his accent thickening slightly. You mean someone who could see his desperation at the tables? Who offered help when the other sharks began to circle? He leaned forward. Your father was losing everything, Elena. his home, his reputation. I gave him a chance. A chance that's now my prison, I whispered. His expression hardened. A chance at a new life. Look around you. He gestured to our opulent surroundings. This is hardly a cell. A gilded cage is still a cage. Before he could respond, the door opened, and a couple entered. A middle-aged man with silver hair, and a much younger woman draped in designer clothes and jewelry that somehow looked gaudy compared to my simple outfit. "Alexei!" The man spread his arms wide. "And this must be the mysterious fiancé we've heard about." Alexei stood, his posture subtly shifting. Shoulders back, chin slightly raised. Even without moving, he seemed to expand, dominating the room. Victor. Isabella. Meet Elena Weaver, soon to be Elena Volkov. The name change hit me like a slap. I hadn't even considered that part of the arrangement. Victor grasped my hand, his grip lingering too long, enchanting. Where has Alexei been hiding such a beauty? She's been completing her nursing degree, Alexei answered smoothly, placing his hand on the small of my back. The touch was possessive, a clear message to Victor, whose eyes had been wandering lower than appropriate. Isabella gave me a cold once-over. A nurse? How charitable of you, Alexei. The implied insult was clear, but Alexei's hand pressed more firmly against my back, a silent command to stay calm. Intelligence and compassion are qualities I value, he replied, his tone light but edged with steel. Unlike some, I don't require constant entertainment. Isabella's face flushed, and Victor cleared his throat uncomfortably. Let's order, shall we? I'm starving. Throughout lunch, I observed the dynamic between these people. Victor deferred to Alexei in subtle ways, waiting for him to speak first, laughing too enthusiastically at his dry comments. Isabella alternated between fawning over Victor and sending me calculating glances. They spoke of businesses and people I didn't know, with undercurrents I couldn't decipher. I picked at my food, some delicate fish dish I'd never be able to afford on my own, and tried to look appropriately engaged while my mind raced. I was learning things about Alexei through these interactions. He was powerful, yes, but it was a specific kind of power that commanded respect, tinged with fear. The way Victor carefully avoided certain topics, the way the staff moved silently around us, anticipating needs before they were expressed. This was not just wealth. This was influence of a darker variety. So, Victor said, after draining his third glass of wine, when's the happy day? Isabella and I would be devastated to miss it. Before I could say anything, Alexei answered, We're keeping it intimate, family only. But we are family, aren't we? Victor pressed, something sharp beneath his jovial tone. After everything we've been through? Alexei's face remained pleasant, but I felt his body tense beside me. Business associates, Victor. Let's not conflate terms. A tense silence followed, broken by Isabella's forced laughter. Men and their business talk. Elena, darling, you must let me help you shop for the wedding. That ring needs a dress to match its splendor. Thank you, I managed, but I think I'll manage on my own. Of course, she said, waving a hand adorned with gaudy rings, though I wonder what sort of gown a nurse would choose for marrying into Alexei's position. Alexei's hand moved from the table to my knee, his fingers pressing lightly in what I realized was a warning, but something in me snapped at this woman's condescension. Something practical, I said, smiling tightly, with pockets deep enough to carry a scalpel. You never know when someone might need emergency surgery for an acute case of superiority complex. Isabella's mouth fell open. Victor stared. And Alexei, to my surprise, let out a genuine laugh, the sound rich and unexpected. This, he said to Victor, is why I chose her. The rest of lunch passed in a blur of tension barely concealed by social niceties. When we finally left, Alexei guided me back to the waiting car with a hand firmly on the small of my back, his fingers splayed possessively. That was unwise, he said once we were inside, though his tone lacked real anger. She was insulting me. Isabella insults everyone. It's her primary function in life. He studied me with new interest. You surprised me. I expected tears, not threats of impromptu surgery. I've worked hospital night shifts in Chicago for years. It takes more than a Botoxed socialite to intimidate me. I turned to face him fully. But you never answered Victor's question. When exactly is this supposed wedding happening? Alexei's expression grew serious. When I determine the timing is right, and until then, I just stay locked in your house, wearing your grandmother's ring, pretending I chose this? You did choose this, Elena. Last night, on that train platform, when I explained your father's debt, when I offered you a way out, his voice was calm, reasonable, making me doubt my own certainty. I don't remember making that choice, I insisted. I would never agree to marry a stranger, no matter what my father owed. You were exhausted, vulnerable, but you were coherent when you signed the papers. His gaze was steady, unwavering. I don't force unwilling women into marriage. That's not how I conduct business. Then let me go. Now. If this was truly my choice, then I should be free to unchoose it. The car slowed, and I realized we'd arrived back at his estate, a sprawling property I hadn't properly seen in daylight. The main house was an imposing stone structure, with manicured gardens surrounding it and a high wall encircling everything. Security cameras were visible at regular intervals along the perimeter. Alexei studied me for a long moment. 3 days, he finally said. Stay for 3 days. Get to know me, my world. If after that time you still wish to leave, I won't stop you. Hope flared in my chest, quickly tempered by suspicion, and my father's debt will remain. But I'll arrange a more conventional repayment plan. 3 days. I could endure 3 days in this gilded cage if it meant freedom afterward. All right. 3 days. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Excellent, then let me give you a proper tour of what will be your home. The estate was even more impressive inside than I'd glimpsed that morning. Room after room of museum-quality art and antiques, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a kitchen where a private chef prepared our meals. Security personnel maintained a discreet presence throughout, and I noticed that certain doors remained locked, certain areas off-limits. My office is private, Alexei explained when we passed a heavy wooden door guarded by one of his men. Business matters require discretion. What kind of business requires armed guards inside your home? I asked. He merely smiled. The profitable kind. As evening approached, Alexei led me to a sitting room where a fire crackled in a marble fireplace. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter, handing one to me before taking a seat opposite. You mentioned last night that you've been working double shifts to pay your father's debts, he said, swirling the liquid in his glass. That must have been exhausting. I took a small sip, the whiskey burning a path down my throat. I did what I had to do. And now? Now I'm here, aren't I? Trading one form of servitude for another. Something like genuine hurt flickered across his face. Is that how you see marriage? Servitude? Marriage is supposed to be a choice between equals. This, I gestured between us, whatever this is an equal. You hold all the power. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Power is rarely equal, Elena. But that doesn't mean there can't be respect. Understanding. How can there be understanding when I don't even know who you really are? I set my glass down. The restaurant owner who keeps armed guards. The businessman with connections to Russian gambling debts. Who are you, Alexei Volkov? For a long moment, he was silent, studying me as if weighing a decision. Finally, he spoke, his voice lower, more intimate. I come from a family that has, for generations, operated outside conventional laws when necessary. We protect our own. We honor our obligations. We never forget a debt, owed to us or by us. You're talking about the Mafia, I said flatly. He didn't flinch from the word. I prefer to think of it as an alternative business structure with strong family values. Despite everything, I almost laughed at his description. Do all your alternative business partners know about me? Am I just another acquisition? No, he said, with unexpected sharpness. You are not to be discussed. My personal life remains separate from business matters. Then why parade me in front of Victor and Isabella today? Victor needed to see that I've made my choice, that I'm unavailable. He finished his drink in one smooth motion. There have been attempts to forge alliances through marriage. I've rejected all such arrangements. Until me. Until you, he agreed, his gaze holding mine across the firelight. The daughter of the man who tried to cheat me, who now wears my family ring. There's a certain poetry to it, don't you think? I stood, suddenly needing distance from his intensity, from the strange magnetism he exuded. I think I'd like to rest before dinner. This has been overwhelming. Alexei rose as well, closer than I expected, of course. Katya will help you with anything you need. As if summoned, the blonde assistant appeared at the doorway. I moved to follow her, but Alexei caught my hand, his thumb brushing over the ring. One more thing, Elena. While you're here, while you wear this, his grip tightened slightly, you are, to the outside world, mine, my choice, my future wife. Remember that when we're in public. I pulled my hand away, ignoring the lingering warmth of his touch. For 3 days. Yes, he agreed, though something in his eyes suggested he believed otherwise. For 3 days. As Katya led me back through the labyrinthine hallways, I caught sight of myself in an ornate mirror. Designer clothes, diamond ring, pale face framed by hair that now fell in soft waves, thanks to the expensive products in Alexei's bathroom. I looked like a stranger, a woman playing dress-up in a life that wasn't hers. But somewhere beneath that reflection was still me, the girl who had worked her way through nursing school, who had faced down aggressive patients and condescending doctors, who had survived her father's death and the crushing weight of his secrets. That girl wasn't going to disappear inside Alexei Volkov's world, no matter how seductive its comforts might be. 3 days to find a way out, 3 days to discover what really happened that night on the train. 3 days to understand the man who claimed to own me, and why, despite everything, I couldn't quite bring myself to hate him. Sleep evaded me that night, despite the cloud-like mattress and silken sheets. I lay awake in the massive bedroom, not Alexei's, but a guest suite he'd assigned to me, until the wedding, listening to the occasional footsteps of security personnel patrolling the hallways. The ring felt heavy on my finger, a constant reminder of my bizarre situation. When dawn finally painted the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold, I gave up on rest. I slipped out of bed and padded to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the estate grounds. In the early morning light, I could see the true extent of my prison. Manicured gardens stretching to a high stone wall, a swimming pool that glittered like sapphires, and beyond that, dense trees that offered privacy from the outside world. Security cameras mounted at strategic intervals completed the picture of beautiful confinement. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting Katya with breakfast or instructions for the day. Instead, Alexei himself entered, already impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. He carried a silver tray with 2 steaming mugs. "You're awake early," he observed, setting the tray on a small table by the window. "I thought you might appreciate coffee." The domesticity of the gesture felt jarring coming from him. "Thank you," I said cautiously, accepting the mug he offered. The rich aroma of perfectly brewed coffee filled my senses. "Did you sleep well?" He took a seat in one of the armchairs by the window, motioning for me to join him. I sank into the chair opposite his, curling my legs beneath me. "Not particularly. That's to be expected. New surroundings." His eyes, more gray than blue in the morning light, studied me over the rim of his mug. "Day 1 of 3 begins now. How would you like to spend it?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected demands, not choices. "I'd like to understand more about my father's connection to you, about the debt I'm supposedly paying off." A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, crossed his features. Direct. "I appreciate that." He set his mug down. "Your father first approached me 4 years ago. He'd already exhausted conventional loans, credit cards, family goodwill. He'd heard my name in certain circles, desperate men often do, and sought me out. At a casino? I prompted. At this very house. He came to a charity gala I hosted, gained entry through an acquaintance. Alexei's expression hardened slightly. He cornered me in my study, begging for help. Said he had a system that couldn't fail. They always have a system. I tried to imagine my father, tweedy, distracted Professor Weaver, approaching this dangerous man, and failed. "And you just gave him $3 million? That seems..." Imprudent. A cold smile touched Alexei's lips. I gave him 500,000, secured against his house, his pension, his life insurance. The rest accumulated through interest, penalties for missed payments, and additional loans he secured through less reputable associates of mine without my knowledge. That can't be legal, I protested. Legal is a flexible concept in certain circles. He leaned forward slightly. Your father knew the terms. He signed the papers with a steady hand. Just as I supposedly had, on that train platform I couldn't remember. And when did you decide I would be collateral? His gaze intensified. I didn't. When Edward died, his debt transferred to his estate, which, as his only living relative, became your responsibility. I watched you struggle for 6 months, working yourself to exhaustion trying to pay creditors who were nothing compared to what you owed me. He paused, something almost like admiration in his voice. You never missed a payment, small as they were. I honored my commitments, I said stiffly. I always do. I know. It's why I decided to offer an alternative arrangement when our paths crossed on that train. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. Get dressed. I want to show you something. 30 minutes later, freshly showered and dressed in clothes that had mysteriously appeared in my closet overnight, dark jeans, a cashmere sweater in deep burgundy, and leather boots, I followed Alexei through the mansion to a room I hadn't seen during yesterday's tour. When he unlocked the heavy door, I expected another display of wealth, perhaps an art collection or wine cellar. Instead, I found myself in what looked like a hospital room. Medical equipment, top-of-the-line monitors, oxygen tanks, IV stands, surrounded a hospital bed. The space was immaculate, sterile, ready for use. What is this? I asked, professional curiosity momentarily overriding my wariness. My mother's room, Alexei said quietly. She has a rare form of early-onset dementia. When she's here rather than the care facility, this is where she stays. I moved closer to the equipment, examining it with a nurse's trained eye. Everything was state-of-the-art, better than what we had at St. Mary's. You care for her here? With professional help, he confirmed. The best neurologists, round-the-clock nursing staff when needed. He watched me inspect the setup. Your father mentioned your specialty was neurological care, that you worked primarily with dementia and stroke patients. The realization hit me with startling clarity. Is that why you chose me? Because I'm a neurological nurse? Alexei's expression remained unreadable. It was a factor. My mother responds better to familiar faces. The consistency of one primary caregiver rather than rotating staff would benefit her. So I'm not just a wife, I'm a live-in nurse, I said bitterly. Efficient. You misunderstand, he replied, a rare flash of emotion, something like offense crossing his features. I would never expect you to serve as her nurse. But having someone in the house who understands her condition, who wouldn't be frightened or disturbed by its manifestations, that would be valuable. I looked around the room, seeing it through new eyes, the care that had gone into its preparation, the expense spared for nothing that might improve a patient's comfort. This didn't align with my image of a cold-blooded Mafia boss. Where is she now? I asked. At Lakeside Care Center. I visit 3 times a week. He moved toward the door. We could go today if you'd like. The offer surprised me. You'd take me outside the estate? A slight smile touched his lips. You're not a prisoner, Elena. You're my fiancé, as far as anyone knows. Where I go, you can go, with appropriate security, of course. The drive to the care facility took 40 minutes, during which Alexei received multiple phone calls that he took in rapid-fire Russian, his tone shifting from conversational to commanding, and back again. I pretended to watch the scenery while straining to understand any words that might give me insight into his business. The only phrase I caught repeatedly was something that sounded like shipment problems. Lakeside Care Center looked more like a luxury resort than a medical facility, situated on sprawling grounds overlooking Lake Michigan, with architecture that blended modern efficiency with homey warmth. The staff greeted Alexei by name, with a deference that suggested his donations likely kept the place running. Mr. Volkov, the director said, hurrying to meet us in the lobby. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. Change of plans, Dr. Hendricks, Alexei replied smoothly. I wanted my fiancé to meet my mother. The director's eyebrows shot up as he noticed me for the first time. Fiancé? How wonderful. He extended his hand. I'm Robert Hendricks, facility director and Mrs. Volkov's primary physician. Elena Weaver, I replied, shaking his hand. I'm a neurological nurse at St. Mary's. Or I was until recently. Elena will be joining my household permanently, Alexei explained, his hand finding the small of my back in what was becoming a familiar, possessive gesture. Well, this is certainly a surprise, Dr. Hendricks said, leading us down a sunlit corridor. Sophia has been having a good week. She was quite lucid yesterday when the physical therapist worked with her. Has she been sleeping? Alexei asked, his businesslike demeanor softening slightly with genuine concern. Better, with the new medication regimen, the doctor replied, though still restless at night sometimes. They continued discussing medication adjustments and therapy schedules with a level of detail that confirmed Alexei was deeply involved in his mother's care. It was the first truly humanizing glimpse I'd had of the man who claimed to own me. Sofia Volkova's private suite was decorated in soft blues and creams, with fresh flowers on every surface and large windows overlooking the lake. The woman herself was tiny in her wheelchair, fragile-looking with silver-streaked dark hair and the same striking gray-blue eyes as her son. Despite her illness, she carried herself with dignity, her posture regal even in weakness. Alyosha, she said when we entered, her accent much thicker than her son's. You bring me a visitor? Alexei knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her frail hand in his. When he spoke, his voice held a gentleness I hadn't heard before. Mama, this is Elena. She is going to be my wife. Sophia's intelligent eyes examined me, missing nothing despite her condition. Come closer, girl. Let me see you. I approached cautiously, feeling strangely nervous under her scrutiny. Your hands, she commanded, extending her own. I placed my hands in hers, surprised by the strength in her grip. She turned them over, examining the ring, then looking at my palms as if reading my future. A healer's hands, she declared, strong but gentle. She looked up at my face. You are afraid of my son. Heat rushed to my cheeks. It's all right. She interrupted with a wave of her hand. Most people are. Even when he was a little boy, so serious, so intense. Her gaze shifted to Alexei. But you're not just afraid. You're angry. I couldn't deny it. Yes. Sophia laughed, the sound unexpectedly musical. Good. He needs someone who won't cower. Too many do. She patted the chair beside her. Sit. Tell me how you met my difficult son. With Alexei watching, I gave a heavily edited version of our meeting, focusing on his rescue of me on the train and omitting any mention of debts or forced arrangements. Sophia listened attentively, occasionally glancing between her son and me with shrewd assessment. And you, Elena, what do you know of our family? She asked when I finished. Very little, I admitted. Alexei's father, my Mikhail, he was like him. Powerful. Feared. Her eyes grew distant. But at home, with me, with our son, he was different. Gentle. A man can wear many faces, you know. Mama, Alexei interrupted softly. Elena doesn't need a history lesson today. She needs truth, Sophia corrected sharply. If she is to be a Volkova. She turned back to me. Our family has enemies, Elena. Always has. Alexei learned young to protect what is his. Sometimes it makes him, how do Americans say, heavy-handed. I couldn't help a small smile at her diplomatic phrasing. That's one way to put it. But a man who loves deeply also protects fiercely, she continued, her gaze intense despite the occasional flicker of confusion that crossed her features. Remember this, when his ways seem harsh to you. When we left an hour later, after Sophia had begun to tire, I felt unsettled by the encounter. I'd expected to meet a frail, confused woman. Instead, I'd found a matriarch who, despite her illness, still commanded respect and saw far too clearly. Your mother is remarkable, I said as we walked back to the car. Yes, Alexei agreed simply. She always has been. She seems to think our engagement is real, I observed. You didn't tell her the truth. His expression hardened. My mother doesn't need to know about business arrangements. She sees what makes her happy, her son, finally settling down with a woman she approves of. And when these 3 days are over, when I leave, what will you tell her then? Alexei stopped walking, turning to face me fully. Are you so certain you will leave? The intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. I don't belong in your world, Alexei. You fit quite well today, he countered. With my mother, with the staff here. You didn't flinch from her condition or talk down to her as many do. That's my training, not evidence I should be your pretend wife. His hand reached up, brushing a strand of hair from my face with unexpected gentleness. Perhaps. Or perhaps there are places you belong that you haven't yet discovered. The touch, the words, sent an involuntary shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear. I stepped back, needing distance from his magnetic presence. 1 day down, 2 to go, I reminded him, and myself. His smile held a confidence that unnerved me. Indeed, and I have plans for tomorrow that may change your perspective further. As we drove back to the estate in silence, I found myself glancing at Alexei's profile. The strong jaw, the intense focus as he read emails on his phone. I'd seen a different side of him today with his mother. A side that complicated the simple narrative of captor and captive I'd constructed, and that, perhaps, was more dangerous than anything else about him. The second morning of my 3-day arrangement dawned with a gentle knock on my door. Katya entered with a tray of breakfast and a garment bag draped over her arm. Mr. Volkov requests that you join him at 9, she said, hanging the bag in the closet. You'll need to dress appropriately. I eyed the bag suspiciously. Where are we going? You have appointments in the city. Her expression remained professionally blank. The dress is for this evening's event. After she left, I unzipped the bag to find an elegant black dress that looked like it belonged on a red carpet. Sleek, simple in its lines, but unmistakably expensive, with a neckline that would showcase the diamond pendant that had mysteriously appeared on my dresser overnight. Another gift I hadn't asked for. Another invisible chain. Precisely at 9, I made my way downstairs in the casual but chic outfit I'd found laid out for me. Tailored black pants, a cream silk blouse, and a soft gray cashmere cardigan. Alexei waited in the foyer, speaking quietly to one of his security team. When he saw me, he dismissed the man with a nod and turned his full attention to me. You look rested, he observed. Better than yesterday. Amazing what accepting one's fate can do, I replied dryly. A slight smile touched his lips. Is that what you've done? Accepted your fate? For the next 48 hours, I glanced at my watch pointedly. Then we'll see. He offered his arm with old-world formality. Then let's make the most of those hours. The day that followed was nothing like I'd expected. Rather than another display of his criminal empire, Alexei took me to a series of appointments that felt surreally normal, a private fitting at a designer boutique where the staff fawned over Mr. Volkov's fiancé, a visit to a renowned jeweler to resize my ring. It was my grandmother's, Alexei explained to the beaming jeweler, maintaining our fiction. Lunch at a rooftop restaurant with views spanning the city. Throughout it all, his security team maintained a discreet but vigilant presence. One man always with us, others positioned strategically nearby, all connected by earpieces. Alexei himself seemed relaxed but watchful, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings in a way I was beginning to recognize as habitual. You never fully relax, do you? I asked over dessert, a delicate chocolate confection I'd barely touched. He considered my question seriously. Not in public, no. Because of your business? Because of who I am. He took a sip of espresso. My father taught me early that letting down one's guard is a luxury our family can't afford. That sounds exhausting, I said, surprising myself with genuine sympathy. Something like appreciation flickered in his eyes. You get used to it. The vigilance becomes second nature. Is that why you built your fortress? To have somewhere you can actually relax? Partly. He studied me for a moment. You're very observant, Elena. I'm a nurse. Observation is part of the job. I set down my fork. Though I notice you've arranged for me to not be a nurse anymore. I can have your position reinstated if that's what you want, he offered unexpectedly, though perhaps at a better hospital, with more reasonable hours. The offer caught me off guard. You'd let me continue working? Within certain parameters, yes. Security considerations would need to be addressed, but it could be arranged. I narrowed my eyes. Why would you do that? Because despite what you think, I don't wish to cage you, he said, his voice dropping to a more intimate register. I want a partner, not a prisoner. A partner in what exactly? I challenged. Your alternative business structure? Something darkened in his gaze. There are aspects of my life that would remain separate, for your protection as much as my interests. Convenient, I murmured. Necessary, he countered. You've seen how Victor looked at you yesterday. Imagine what my real enemies would do to the woman wearing my ring if they had the chance. A chill ran through me at his words. At the casual way he referenced enemies who would target me simply for my proximity to him. This was the reality of his world. The danger lurking beneath the luxury. Our final stop before returning to the estate was a private art gallery in a converted warehouse. Unlike the other locations we'd visited, this one bore no signage, its entrance unmarked except for a discreet security camera. Alexei's driver pulled around to a back alley, where a steel door opened as we approached. What is this place? I asked as Alexei helped me from the car. Something I think you'll appreciate, he replied cryptically. Inside, the industrial space had been transformed into a stunning gallery, soaring ceilings, polished concrete floors, and walls displaying art that even my untrained eye recognized as exceptional. Modern pieces hung alongside classical paintings. Sculptures dotted the open floor, and at the far end, a spiral staircase led to an upper level. A tall, elegant woman with short silver hair approached us, embracing Alexei with European double kisses. You're late, she admonished him in accented English. Forgive me, Irina. Elena and I lost track of time. He placed his hand at the small of my back, the gesture now familiar. Elena, this is Irina Kuznetsova, an old family friend and the finest art curator in the city. The woman's shrewd eyes assessed me without pretense. So this is the nurse who has captured our Alexei's heart. I expected someone more sophisticated, I supplied when she trailed off. Irina laughed, a rich, genuine sound. I was going to say intimidated. Most women he brings here are too busy fawning to actually look at the art. She offered her hand. Come. Let me show you what he's been working on. Curiosity piqued, I followed her through the gallery to a section cordoned off by velvet ropes. Alexei remained slightly behind us, taking a call on his phone and speaking in hushed Russian. This, Irina said with evident pride, is the Volkov Foundation's latest project. Before us hung a series of paintings I didn't recognize, vibrant works from various periods and styles. Beside each was a placard describing the piece's history, with special emphasis on how it had been looted during World War II and subsequently recovered. These are all stolen works? I asked, surprised. Rescued works, Irina corrected. Recovered from private collections where they'd been hidden for decades after being looted from Jewish families during the Holocaust. The foundation specializes in returning art to the descendants of the original owners. I turned to Alexei, who had rejoined us. You run a foundation that recovers stolen art? He shrugged, almost looking embarrassed. It was my mother's project originally. I continued it after her health declined. The foundation has returned over 200 pieces to their rightful owners, Irina added, though some families are harder to track down than others. She gestured to a particularly striking landscape. This one, we've been searching for the heirs for 3 years. The family scattered across Europe during the war. I studied Alexei with new confusion. The man who threatened me with financial ruin was the same man who dedicated resources to returning stolen art to Holocaust survivors' families. The contradiction made my head spin. Why show me this? I asked him when Irina excused herself to take a call. Because you should know what you're walking away from, he answered simply. Not just me, but the work we could do together. Art recovery, legacy, he corrected. My mother always taught me that power without purpose is meaningless. The foundation is part of our purpose. His eyes held mine. Your skills, your compassion. They could expand our impact in healthcare, in patient advocacy. I laughed incredulously. So now, I'm not just a wife and nurse, but also your foundation's healthcare ambassador? You could be whatever you choose to be, Elena, he said seriously. With resources behind you that most people only dream of. The offer was seductive in its expansiveness. Limitless possibilities. The power to actually make a difference rather than barely keeping my head above water as I had been. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine it, working alongside Alexei in this capacity, channeling his wealth toward genuine good. Then reality reasserted itself. All it would cost is my freedom. His expression hardened slightly. Is it freedom to work endless shifts to pay debts you'll never clear? To exhaust yourself for a system that undervalues you? Sometimes, Elena, what we think of as freedom is merely a different kind of cage. Before I could respond, Irina returned with news that our car was waiting. The ride back to the estate passed in thoughtful silence, my mind wrestling with the contradictions Alexei presented. By the time we arrived, I had barely an hour to prepare for the evening event he'd mentioned. Katya helped me dress in the black gown, which fit as if it had been made for me, and perhaps it had been. The diamond pendant nestled at my collarbone, catching the light with every breath. When I emerged from my room, Alexei waited in the hallway, resplendent in a tuxedo that emphasized his powerful build. His eyes widened slightly when he saw me, his gaze traveling slowly from my upswept hair to the heels that added inches to my height. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," I replied, fighting the warmth that bloomed in my chest at his approval. "Where are we going?" "The symphony. A charity gala afterward." He offered his arm. "The foundation is being honored for its work." The Chicago Symphony Orchestra's performance that night was breathtaking. Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto in D major, performed by a young virtuoso whose passion brought tears to my eyes. Seated in Alexei's private box, surrounded by luxury I'd never experienced, I found myself swept away by the music, momentarily forgetting the bizarre circumstances that had brought me there. When I glanced at Alexei during a particularly moving passage, I found him watching me rather than the stage, his expression unguarded for once. Something intimate passed between us in that moment. A shared appreciation. A connection I couldn't deny despite everything. The gala afterward was held in an opulent ballroom, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over hundreds of Chicago's elite. Alexei guided me through the crowd with a protective hand at my back, introducing me to a blur of important people. Business associates, politicians, philanthropists. To each, he presented me proudly as my fiancée, Elena, the possessive claim sending confused shivers through me each time. "You navigate this world effortlessly," I observed during a rare moment alone, sipping champagne that probably cost more than my monthly rent had. "It's a performance," he replied, his voice low enough that only I could hear, "a necessary one." "And which version is the real you?" I asked. "The art patron? The businessman? The Mafia boss?" His lips curved slightly. "All of them. None of them." His hand found mine, fingers intertwining with an intimacy that felt dangerous. "Which version of yourself is most real, Elena? The dutiful daughter paying her father's debts? The compassionate nurse? The woman who threatens socialites with scalpels?" The question hit closer to home than I cared to admit. Before I could respond, we were interrupted by a striking woman in a red gown who approached with deliberate purpose. "Alexei," she purred, ignoring me completely. "I was beginning to think you were avoiding me." A subtle tension rippled through him, though his expression remained pleasant. "Natalia, I wasn't expecting you tonight." "Clearly," she replied, her gaze finally shifting to me, trailing over my dress, my ring, my hand in his with calculated dismissal. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend, my fiancé?" Alexei corrected, his voice cooling several degrees. "Elena, this is Natalia Orlova, daughter of an associate. Natalia, my future wife, Elena Weaver." The woman's perfectly made-up face couldn't quite hide her shock and fury. "Fiancé? How sudden." She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I wasn't aware you were even dating anyone." "We prefer privacy," Alexei replied smoothly, Natalia's gaze fixed on me with new intensity. "And what exactly do you do, Elena?" besides catching Chicago's most eligible bachelor? Before I could answer, Alexei cut in. Elena is a neurological specialist. She worked at St. Mary's until recently. A nurse? Natalia's eyebrows rose, her tone making the profession sound like something distasteful. How charitable of you, Alexei. The condescension in her voice sparked something defiant in me. Mr. Volkov values compassion, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. Not everyone does. Alexei's hand tightened around mine. Whether in warning or approval, I couldn't tell. If you'll excuse us, Natalia, the Foundation's presentation is about to begin. As he led me away, I felt her glare burning into my back. I'm guessing she expected to be in my position, I murmured. Her father has been pushing for an arrangement for years, Alexei confirmed. I've never been interested. She's beautiful, I observed neutrally. Beauty without substance holds no appeal for me. His thumb traced circles on my hand, sending unwanted warmth through my veins. Besides, I'm already spoken for, aren't I? The reminder of our temporary arrangement landed like a splash of cold water. For one more day. His eyes met mine, intense and unwavering. We'll see. The Foundation presentation passed in a blur, with Alexei delivering a brief speech that was surprisingly heartfelt about continuing his mother's legacy. When we finally left close to midnight, exhaustion had settled deep in my bones, the emotional whiplash of the day taking its toll. In the car, I found myself fighting to keep my eyes open. Alexei noticed, of course. He seemed to notice everything about me. Rest, he said softly. We're almost home. Home. The word echoed strangely in my mind as I drifted off, my head eventually finding its way to his shoulder, his arm coming around me in a protective gesture that felt both foreign and oddly right. My last conscious thought was a troubling one. In just 2 days, Alexei Volkov had begun to blur the lines between captor and savior in ways I hadn't thought possible, and tomorrow, my final day in his world, would determine whether I walked away or surrendered to the golden cage he'd built around me. I awoke in my own bed, though I had no memory of how I'd gotten there. The dress had been replaced with silk pajamas, my jewelry carefully placed on the dresser. Had Alexei carried me? Had Katya helped me change? The thought of either scenario sent heat rushing to my cheeks. Today marked the final day of our agreement. The last of my 3 days in Alexei Volkov's world. By this time tomorrow, I would either be free of him or bound to him permanently. The weight of the decision pressed on me as I showered and dressed in the clothes laid out for me, a simple sundress in soft blue, comfortable yet elegant. When I went downstairs, the house was unusually quiet. No security personnel in the hallways, no sounds of staff preparing breakfast. I found my way to the kitchen, where a note waited on the counter in Alexei's bold handwriting. Gone to handle business. Back by noon. Make yourself at home. Make myself at home. The irony wasn't lost on me. Still, his absence offered an opportunity I couldn't ignore. A chance to search for answers about what really happened that night on the train. About the documents I supposedly signed. About Alexei himself. I moved cautiously through the mansion, alert for any remaining staff or security. The main floor seemed deserted, though I had no doubt cameras tracked my movements. I headed straight for the room I most wanted to explore, Alexei's study, the one room that had remained firmly off-limits during my stay. To my surprise, the door was unlocked, either a careless oversight or a deliberate test. I hesitated only briefly before pushing it open and stepping inside. The space was exactly what I'd expected. Masculine, imposing, with leather-bound books lining built-in shelves and a massive desk dominating the center of the room. Windows overlooked the back gardens, and a pair of leather chairs faced a small fireplace along one wall. Everything spoke of power and old money, from the antique globe in the corner to the oil paintings of stern-looking ancestors on the walls. I went straight to the desk, careful not to disturb anything as I searched for clues. The surface held little of interest. A leather blotter, an expensive pen set, a framed photo of a younger Alexei with his mother in what looked like Red Square. I tried the drawers, finding most locked, except one that contained routine business correspondence, nothing incriminating or revealing. A safe was built into the wall behind a painting, too obvious, and certainly beyond my ability to crack. Filing cabinets lined one wall, but they too were locked. Frustration mounted as I realized Alexei was too careful to leave sensitive information lying around, even in his supposedly secure sanctuary. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A small wooden box on a side table, intricately carved with what looked like the Volkov family crest. Unlike everything else in the room, it wasn't locked, the lid lifting easily when I tried it. Inside lay several items that seemed intensely personal: an old pocket watch, a black and white photo of a stern-looking man who had Alexei's eyes, a folded piece of paper that proved to be a child's drawing signed Alyosha, age 7, and beneath everything, a small velvet pouch. My fingers trembled as I opened the pouch, knowing I was crossing a line by invading this private collection. Inside was a small, worn photograph. Alexei looking younger and more carefree than I'd ever seen him, with his arm around a smiling young woman with chestnut hair and warm eyes. They looked happy, in love. Who was she? What had happened to her? Find what you're looking for. I whirled around, heart hammering in my chest. Alexei stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I hadn't heard him approach, a man his size moving with silent precision. Words failed me as guilt warred with defiance. I was trying to understand. Understand what? He entered the room fully, closing the door behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded ominous. What happened that night on the train? What I supposedly agreed to. I held up the photograph. Who you really are. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or anger. He crossed to me and gently took the photo from my fingers, returning it to the pouch with careful movements. Her name was Irina. She was my fiancée many years ago. What happened to her? I asked softly, knowing from his use of past tense that the story didn't have a happy ending. Alexei's jaw tightened. She was killed. A car bombing meant for me. He closed the box with finality. She paid the price for loving me. The simple brutality of his statement stunned me into silence. Here was the reality of his world laid bare. The violence that shadowed his every step, that had taken someone he loved. I'm sorry, I said finally, meaning it. It was a long time ago. His voice was flat, controlled. But it taught me valuable lessons about keeping those I care for safe. The implication hung between us: his excessive security, his control over my movements, his insistence on keeping me in his protected world, all stemming from this loss, this guilt. Is that why you arranged this situation with me? I asked. Keep me close to keep me safe from your father's creditors? He studied me for a long moment. Partly, but there's more to the story. He moved to a painting on the far wall, not the one concealing the safe, but another, a landscape of the Russian countryside. When he swung it aside, it revealed not another safe, but a hidden door that opened when he pressed his palm to it. Come, he said, extending his hand to me. It's time you knew everything. Heart pounding, I placed my hand in his, allowing him to lead me through the hidden door into what appeared to be a second office. Smaller, more modern, with bank of computer screens showing security feeds from around the property. A large table dominated the center, covered with documents. This is where I actually work, Alexei explained, releasing my hand to pick up a file folder. The other office is for show, for visitors who expect a certain aesthetic. He handed me the folder. Inside was a dossier on me. Photos of me leaving the hospital after shifts, getting coffee, entering my apartment building. Detailed reports on my movements, my financial situation, my father's gambling habits. The thoroughness of the surveillance chilled me to the bone. You've been watching me for years, I whispered. The evidence undeniable. Yes. He made no attempt to deny or justify it. From the moment your father took that first loan. Why? Why this level of... I gestured to the thick file. This obsession? Alexei sighed, suddenly looking tired. It started as routine monitoring of a debtor's family, standard procedure to ensure we had leverage if needed. He moved to one of the screens, pulling up an image that made my breath catch. Me, 3 years ago, running into a burning building. I remembered that day vividly. I'd been walking home from a shift when I passed an apartment building with smoke pouring from a second-floor window. Without thinking, I'd run inside to help an elderly woman who couldn't evacuate on her own. The local news had covered it briefly. Nursing student rescues, elderly woman from fire. I hadn't thought anyone had paid much attention. This, Alexei said softly, was the moment I became interested in more than your father's debt. Because I ran into a burning building? I asked, confused. Because you risked your life for a stranger without hesitation. His eyes met mine. Do you know how rare that quality is in my world? How valuable? I shook my head, trying to process what he was telling me. So you've been, what? Grooming me as a potential wife for 3 years? I've been watching you, he corrected. Learning who you are, waiting for the right moment to approach you. His expression darkened. Then your father died, leaving you drowning in his debts. Debts I could have called in immediately, ruined you completely. But you didn't, I said slowly. No. I waited, watched you work yourself to exhaustion, trying to honor obligations that weren't yours. Something like admiration colored his voice. Your loyalty, even to a father who had betrayed your trust repeatedly, it was remarkable. It wasn't remarkable, I insisted. It was just right. In my experience, Elena, people rarely do what's right when it's difficult. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. That night on the train, it wasn't chance. I arranged to be there when you would be most vulnerable, most open to an alternative. A chill ran through me. You planned it all. Yes. No apology, no justification, just truth. Did you drug me? I demanded, needing to know. No, he said firmly. I would never. You were exhausted, barely conscious even before you fell asleep. When I woke you at your stop, you were disoriented, suggestible. I helped you off the train, explained your situation, offered my solution. His eyes held mine. You agreed, Elena. Not enthusiastically, perhaps, but consciously. Then you passed out again in my car from sheer exhaustion. I searched my memory, trying to find any fragment of this interaction. But the night remained a blank. I don't remember any of it. People often don't remember decisions made in states of extreme fatigue, he said. It's similar to the amnesia surgical patients sometimes experience after receiving sedatives. They can have entire conversations they later forget. As a nurse, I knew this was true. I'd seen patients have lucid conversations they had no memory of later. Still, the violation of it, the manipulation, made me feel ill. So what happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Our 3 days are almost up. Alexei moved to the table, picking up another document, the marriage license I'd supposedly signed. Now I give you a real choice, with full information and a clear mind. He tore the paper in half, the sound shockingly loud in the quiet room. The original agreement is void. I stared at the torn document, stunned. What does that mean? It means you're free to leave, right now, with no obligations. He opened a drawer and removed an envelope, placing it on the table between us. Inside is documentation releasing you from your father's debt entirely, plus enough money to start over wherever you choose. New city, new job, new life. You'll never see or hear from me again. My hands shook as I reached for the envelope. Just like that? After all this effort? Just like that. His expression was carefully blank, but something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps. I want you, Elena, but not as a prisoner, not as someone who stays out of fear or obligation. I opened the envelope, verifying its contents, documents indeed releasing me from all debt, and a cashier's check with more zeros than I'd ever seen. Why? Why offer this now? Alexei's controlled facade cracked slightly, genuine emotion bleeding through. Because in these 3 days, I've seen the woman you truly are. Not just in files and surveillance photos, but up close. Your compassion with my mother, your strength with Natalia and Isabella, your curiosity about my work. He paused. You deserve a real choice. And if I choose to stay? The question surprised me as much as him. Something like hope flickered across his features before he controlled it. Then we start again, properly. No debts, no obligations, no pretense. Just 2 people learning if they can build something real together, with you still being who you are, I added, still running your businesses. Yes, he acknowledged. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. My world has darkness in it, Elena. Danger. I can promise to keep it away from you as much as possible, but I can't change who I am or the legacy I was born into. The honesty was stark, unvarnished. For the first time since waking in his bed, wearing his ring, I felt like I was seeing the real Alexei Volkov, not just the Mafia boss, the businessman, or the devoted son, but all of them together. "I need some air," I said, the walls suddenly feeling too close. "I need to think." He nodded. "The gardens are secure." "Take all the time you need. I'll be in the main study when you've decided." The gardens were peaceful in the late afternoon sunlight, flowers releasing their fragrance into the warm air. I walked the stone paths, the envelope clutched in my hand, wrestling with the impossible choice before me: freedom, a fresh start, safety from the danger that shadowed Alexei's world, or a life with a man who had manipulated me, but also protected me, who had shown me glimpses of tenderness alongside his ruthless control, who ran criminal enterprises, but also returned stolen art to Holocaust survivors, who had watched me for years, but was now giving me a genuine choice. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, I made my decision. I found my way back to the main study, where Alexei stood by the window, his powerful frame silhouetted against the dying light. He turned as I entered, his expression guarded but his eyes betraying his tension. I crossed to him slowly, stopping just out of reach. "I have conditions," I said. Something like hope flickered in his gaze. "Name them." "I returned to nursing. Not full-time, perhaps, but I need my work. It's part of who I am." He nodded. "With appropriate security arrangements, yes. I want to be involved in the foundation. Expand it to include medical care for underserved communities." A smile touched his lips. "Done. My mother would approve. And I need honesty between us, complete honesty." I held his gaze. "No more manipulations, no more secrets." This gave him pause. "There are aspects of my business that must remain. I don't need operational details," I clarified. "I need to know who you are, what you feel, what you want from me, all of it, not just the parts you think I can handle." He considered this, then nodded slowly. "I can give you that." I took a deep breath, my decision crystallizing with each passing moment. "One more thing. We start from the beginning. No engagement, no rushed timeline. We date, like normal people. We learn each other slowly." Alexei's smile was genuine now, reaching his eyes and transforming his severe features into something approaching tenderness. "I believe the traditional first step is dinner." "Dinner?" I agreed, surprising myself with a small smile in return. "Not as your possession or your salvation, but as two people seeing where this leads." He extended his hand, an invitation rather than a demand. After a moment's hesitation, I placed my palm against his, feeling the warmth of his skin, the strength in his fingers as they closed gently around mine. "To new beginnings," he said softly. As the last light of day filtered through the windows, casting us in golden hues, I realized I was stepping willingly into Alexei's world. With my eyes open, my mind clear, and my heart cautiously optimistic. The path ahead held no guarantees, only possibilities. Darkness and light intertwined, danger and protection, passion and power. I had woken up in the Mafia boss's bed 3 days ago, a ring on my finger and confusion in my mind. Now I stood before him by choice, the future unwritten but undeniably ours to shape together. "To new beginnings," I echoed, and took my first deliberate step toward him. The bitter winter wind howled through San Francisco's streets as Mia Sullivan balanced a tray of champagne flutes, weaving through the glittering crowd at the Golden Gate Opera House, her worn shoes pinched with every step, a harsh reminder of the 25-year-old nursing student's place among the city's elite gathering for tonight's performance. In Box 7, the most luxurious private seating in the Opera House, Victoria Cavallari pressed a hand to her throat, her face flushing an unnatural crimson as she struggled for breath. The elegant 60-year-old woman's diamond necklace caught the light as she slumped against the velvet cushions, her whispered words barely audible. "Tell my son, poison." Mia noticed the older woman's distress while serving the adjacent box, her nursing instincts immediately recognizing the symptoms of thallium poisoning from her toxicology course. Without hesitation, she slipped into Box 7, abandoning her serving duties to check the woman's pulse while scanning for signs that would confirm her suspicion. "Someone call an ambulance," Mia commanded, her voice carrying an authority that belied her position as a mere server in this world of wealth and privilege. The other guests in the box stared blankly, paralyzed by shock, or perhaps unwilling to get involved in whatever was happening. Victoria clutched Mia's wrist with surprising strength, pressing a phone into the young woman's hand with trembling fingers. "Call Stefano," she gasped, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "My son. Tell him I was poisoned. Box 7. Tell him only demercaprol will work. Time is running out." Mia's fingers trembled as she dialed the number, her mind racing through everything she knew about thallium poisoning and its antidote. The line connected after a single ring, and a deep, controlled voice answered, "Mother, this isn't a good time for—" "Your mother's been poisoned at Box 7 in the Golden Gate Opera House," Mia interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm a nursing student. She's showing signs of thallium poisoning and needs demercaprol immediately, or she'll die within the hour." Stefano Cavallari's world stopped at the stranger's words, his business meeting forgotten as ice spread through his veins. The 30-year-old man rose from his leather chair, gesturing sharply to the men around him to clear the room as he switched to speakerphone, his voice dangerously calm. "Who are you? And how did you recognize thallium poisoning?" he demanded, already signaling to his driver through the glass partition of his office. His mother's condition was his only concern, but this unknown woman with her precise medical knowledge presented a puzzle he couldn't ignore. Mia's nursing textbooks had never prepared her for the reality of an actual poisoning, much less one involving the mother of a man whose reputation preceded him throughout San Francisco. "I'm Mia Sullivan, second-year nursing student at SF General," she answered quickly, pressing 2 fingers against Victoria's wrist to monitor her weakening pulse. "Stay with her," Stefano commanded, his voice leaving no room for refusal as the sound of a car engine roared to life in the background. "I'll be there in 8 minutes with the antidote. If you're lying about any of this, you won't live to regret it." Mia felt her breath catch at the thinly veiled threat, but she had no time to dwell on fear as Victoria's condition deteriorated rapidly before her eyes. The paramedics would be too slow with standard protocol, and Mia made a split-second decision that would irrevocably change her life's trajectory. "I need ice, alcohol wipes, and any medication she has in her purse," Mia ordered the stunned companions in the box, her voice cutting through their whispered concerns. She had recognized one of the symptoms unique to thallium. The victims often experienced intense internal heat while their extremities grew cold. The opera continued on stage below, the soprano's haunting aria, providing a surreal soundtrack to the life-and-death drama unfolding in Box 7. Mia loosened Victoria's pearl choker and elevated her feet, basic first aid that seemed woefully inadequate against the deadly poison now coursing through the older woman's system. When Stefano Cavallari burst through the door of Box 7 exactly 8 minutes later, the atmosphere changed instantly, as if the air itself recognized the presence of power. His tailored suit couldn't disguise the deadly grace with which he moved, nor could his handsome features mask the dangerous intensity in his eyes. Stefano knelt beside his mother, his face betraying nothing as he assessed her condition with a single glance, before fixing his attention on the young woman in the server's uniform. He produced a small case containing several vials and a syringe, his movements precise and controlled as if he'd done this before. "You're certain it's thallium?" he asked Mia, his voice low enough that only she could hear him as he prepared the antidote. The question held layers of meaning. Was she certain enough to stake her life on this diagnosis? Mia met his gaze without flinching, her chin lifting slightly as she recited the telltale symptoms she had observed. Abdominal pain, peripheral neuropathy, rapidly progressing weakness, the metallic taste she complained of before losing consciousness, and the timing suggests it was in her champagne, which is consistent with thallium's solubility profile. "Hold her still," Stefano instructed, handing Mia the syringe while he cradled his mother's head with unexpected tenderness. Their hands brushed briefly, a fleeting moment of connection that somehow felt significant amidst the chaos surrounding them. Mia administered the demercaprol with steady hands, her medical training overriding any nervousness she might have felt under Stefano's intense scrutiny. The drug would bind to the heavy metal particles in Victoria's bloodstream, allowing her body to excrete the poison before it could cause permanent damage. Victoria's breathing gradually stabilized as the antidote took effect, color slowly returning to her ashen face while Stefano maintained a protective stance beside her. His eyes, however, never left Mia, studying her with an unreadable expression that made her increasingly aware of how far she'd strayed from her usual world. "The ambulance is 2 minutes out," one of Stefano's men reported from the doorway, his posture deferential but alert, as he scanned the gathering crowd outside Box 7. The opera had ended, and curious onlookers were beginning to notice the commotion. Stefano nodded once, then turned back to Mia with narrowed eyes that seemed to see through her carefully constructed facade of confidence. "You saved my mother's life," he stated matter-of-factly, the words carrying the weight of a debt acknowledged. Sirens wailed outside the opera house as paramedics rushed in with a gurney, their efficient movements creating a buffer between Mia and the intensity of Stefano's presence. She stepped back, suddenly conscious of her wrinkled uniform and the champagne stains on her sleeves. "I should get back to work," Mia murmured, attempting to retreat into anonymity now that professional medical help had arrived. The adrenaline that had carried her through the crisis was beginning to ebb, leaving her lightheaded and uncomfortably aware of her precarious position. Stefano's hand closed around her wrist before she could slip away, his grip firm but not painful as he drew her attention back to him. "Your employment here is terminated," he informed her with quiet authority, ignoring her startled expression as he continued. "You're coming with us to the hospital." "I can't just leave. I need this job," Mia protested, acutely aware of the unpaid bills waiting in her apartment and the tuition payment looming at the end of the month. Her practical concerns sounded trivial, even to her own ears when weighed against a woman's life, but they were her reality. "Your manager has been compensated for your services tonight, with a substantial bonus," Stefano replied, a hint of impatience coloring his tone as the paramedics began moving his mother toward the exit. His eyes flicked meaningfully toward the stage below, where the conductor was taking his final bow. "You didn't save a random socialite tonight," he added in a lower voice, leaning close enough that Mia could detect the subtle scent of expensive cologne beneath the metallic odor of the demercaprol. "You saved Victoria Cavallari, a name that carries weight in this city for reasons you don't want to understand." The hospital waiting room felt like neutral territory, a sterile environment where the stark differences between Mia's world and Stefano's temporarily faded into the background. She sat across from him, clutching a cup of bitter vending machine coffee that she hadn't tasted, hyper-aware of the two men standing guard near the entrance. "You recognized a poison that most doctors wouldn't identify without extensive tests," Stefano observed, after the silence between them had stretched to uncomfortable lengths. His tone remained conversational, but his eyes were calculating, assessing her with the cool precision of a man accustomed to identifying threats. Mia shifted under his scrutiny, wondering if her quick thinking had placed her in more danger than if she'd simply called 911 and walked away. "I had a professor who specialized in uncommon toxins," she explained, the half-truth slipping easily from her lips. "And this professor taught nursing students to recognize thallium poisoning on sight?" Stefano pressed, his skepticism evident in the slight arch of his eyebrow. He leaned forward, reducing the space between them, as if physical proximity might extract the truth more effectively. Mia dropped her gaze to the linoleum floor, her mind racing to construct a plausible explanation that wouldn't raise more questions. The real story of her obsessive research into poisons after her own mother's suspicious death 3 years ago wasn't something she was prepared to share with this dangerous stranger. "I think the more relevant question is, who would want to poison your mother?" she countered, lifting her eyes to meet his with newfound boldness. If he wanted answers from her, she deserved some in return, especially if those answers might help her understand the situation she'd stumbled into. A flicker of surprise crossed Stefano's face, quickly replaced by something that might have been respect, if not for the dangerous edge underlying it. "Careful, Miss Sullivan," he warned softly. "Curiosity in my world often proves fatal." "Is that a threat?" Mia asked, her voice steadier than she felt as she set down her untouched coffee. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across Stefano's features, highlighting the tension in his jaw and the vigilance in his posture. Stefano's laugh held no humor, a brief sound that disappeared as quickly as it had emerged. "No, that's a fact," he corrected her, checking his watch with deliberate casualness that failed to mask his underlying impatience for news about his mother's condition. "The Cavallari family has enemies," he continued after a moment, studying her reaction with unsettling intensity. "People who would benefit from my mother's death, or use it as a message meant for me." Mia absorbed this information in silence, the implications settling like ice in her stomach as she processed what he wasn't saying explicitly. The rumors about the Cavallari family's connections to organized crime in San Francisco suddenly felt less like urban legends and more like dangerous truths she couldn't unknow. A doctor appeared at the entrance to the waiting room, his expression carefully neutral as he approached them. "Mr. Cavallari, your mother is stable and responding well to treatment," he reported, his eyes flicking briefly, curiously, toward Mia before focusing again on Stefano. "The initial intervention was crucial," the doctor continued, his professional tone unable to completely mask his curiosity about the circumstances. "Whoever recognized the poison and administered the antidote so quickly almost certainly saved her life." Stefano nodded once, dismissing the doctor with a gesture before turning back to Mia, his expression unreadable as he considered her anew. The tenuous connection formed in crisis had shifted into something more complicated, a debt owed, information shared, and questions raised that neither could easily walk away from. "I need to know everything about tonight," he stated rather than asked, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "Every person who approached Box 7, every server who handled her food and drink, every detail you noticed before she collapsed." 3 days after the poisoning incident, Mia unlocked the door to her cramped studio apartment in the Mission District, freezing at the sight of Stefano Cavallari seated at her tiny kitchen table. The overhead light cast shadows across his sharp features as he studied her nursing textbooks with casual interest. "Most people knock," she managed to say, dropping her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door while mentally cataloging possible escape routes. The contrast between his tailored suit and her secondhand furniture made the room feel even smaller than its already modest dimensions. "Security precaution," Stefano replied without apology, gesturing to the empty chair across from him, as if he were the host rather than an intruder. His eyes took in the water stain spreading across her ceiling and the carefully mended curtains with an unreadable expression. Mia remained standing, arms crossed defensively as she waited for an explanation for this invasion of her private space. The thin walls of her apartment suddenly felt inadequate protection against whatever dangerous world had followed Stefano Cavallari to her doorstep. "The person who poisoned my mother knows you exist," he stated bluntly, placing a manila folder on the table between them. "Your name and address were circulated in certain circles within hours of the incident at the Opera House." Mia felt cold dread settle in her stomach as she finally sank into the chair opposite him, the implications of his words sinking in. "Is that supposed to be a threat? Or a warning?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. "Consider it both," Stefano answered, opening the folder to reveal surveillance photos of Mia leaving her apartment, attending classes, and working at her second job at a 24-hour diner. The timestamps showed they'd been taken over the past 2 days, without her noticing a thing. "I won't live in fear because I helped someone," Mia said, pushing the photos away with a decisiveness that belied her inner turmoil. Her life had been precarious enough before getting entangled with whatever dangerous game the Cavallari family was playing. Stefano leaned back in the rickety chair, studying her with newfound interest as he registered her defiance, rather than the expected fear. "My family has a compound in Pacific Heights with state-of-the-art security," he said after a moment, his tone making it clear this wasn't merely a suggestion. "You expect me to just abandon my life and move in with strangers because of some vague threat?" Mia challenged, gesturing around at her small apartment filled with carefully chosen second-hand furniture and medical textbooks purchased with hard-earned money. "This may not look like much to you, but it's mine." "It won't remain yours for long if you're dead," Stefano countered, his bluntness cutting through her protests. He slid another photo across the table, this one showing a broken lock on her apartment door from earlier that day while she'd been in class. Mia's breath caught as she recognized what the photo represented. Someone had been inside her home today, invading her space just as Stefano had, but with far more sinister intentions. The violation sent a chill down her spine that no amount of righteous indignation could dispel. "Pack whatever you need for 2 weeks," Stefano instructed, rising from the table with the fluid grace of a predator accustomed to having his commands obeyed. His tone left no room for negotiation as he added, "My driver will be waiting downstairs in 20 minutes. Mia stared at him in stunned silence, the realization dawning that her life had fundamentally changed the moment she entered Box 7 at the Golden Gate Opera House. The nursing student who worried about tuition payments and double shifts now had to contend with poisoners and Mafia protection. "I have classes, clinicals, my job at the diner. I can't just disappear," she protested, though the argument sounded hollow even to her own ears when weighed against the very real threat to her life. Her carefully constructed path toward financial stability and independence suddenly seemed fragile. The Cavallari estate stood in stark contrast to everything Mia had known, its wrought iron gates opening to reveal manicured gardens, and a mansion of imposing grandeur overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Security cameras tracked their movement as Stefano's car wound up the private driveway, the city lights twinkling below like a separate universe she'd left behind. "This is temporary," Mia reminded herself aloud, as a uniformed staff member appeared to take her single duffel bag, treating the worn canvas with the same deference they might show a designer suitcase. The absurdity of her situation hit her anew with each step into this world of privilege. Stefano watched her reaction with thinly veiled amusement, clearly accustomed to the disorientation visitors experienced upon first encountering the family's wealth. "Victoria is asking for you," he said, guiding her through the marble-floored entryway toward a sweeping staircase that seemed designed to intimidate. Victoria Cavallari's suite occupied the entire east wing of the second floor, its windows offering panoramic views of the bay that would have cost millions on the real estate market. The elegant older woman sat propped against silk pillows, her recovery evident in the healthy color that had returned to her complexion. "My guardian angel arrives at last," Victoria greeted Mia with genuine warmth that seemed at odds with her regal bearing. She extended a hand adorned with a single platinum band, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who had so recently been at death's door. Mia found herself drawn to the bedside, her medical training automatically assessing Victoria's vital signs, even as she tried to reconcile this elegant woman with the dying patient from Box 7. "How are your symptoms?" she asked, slipping unconsciously into her clinical persona. "Much improved, thanks to your extraordinary intervention," Victoria replied, her piercing blue eyes, so similar to her son's, studying Mia with undisguised curiosity. "Stefano tells me you're a nursing student with an unusual knowledge of poisons." Mia tensed, aware of Stefano watching the exchange from his position by the doorway, his presence a silent reminder of unanswered questions and growing suspicions. "Just part of my training," she answered carefully, unwilling to reveal how personal her interest in toxicology truly was. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation, and Stefano moved with practiced efficiency to intercept the staff member who entered with an envelope bearing no postmark or return address. The silent exchange and Stefano's immediate tension spoke volumes about the family's ongoing security concerns. "Another warning?" Victoria asked her son with remarkable composure, seemingly unsurprised by the development. Her casual acceptance of danger reinforced Mia's growing understanding that the Cavallari family operated in a world where threats were commonplace rather than extraordinary. Stefano's jaw tightened as he examined the contents of the envelope, his expression darkening before he crossed the room to show his mother while keeping the message hidden from Mia's view. The silent communication between mother and son left Mia feeling distinctly like an outsider, witnessing a private language she couldn't interpret. "It seems our enemies are growing impatient," Victoria observed with the calm detachment of someone discussing weather patterns rather than potential violence. She turned to Mia with renewed interest, adding, "And they're quite curious about you, my dear." Mia felt a chill race down her spine at Victoria's words, suddenly aware that she'd been drawn into something far more dangerous than she'd initially understood. "Why would anyone care about me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper in the opulent room. "Because you prevented a carefully orchestrated assassination," Stefano answered bluntly, pocketing the mysterious message as he approached them. "And because they don't know how you were able to recognize the poison so quickly. A question I'm still considering myself." "I told you it was part of my toxicology training," Mia insisted, the lie feeling hollow even to her own ears. Her fingers unconsciously traced the outline of the locket hidden beneath her sweater, the one containing the only photo of her mother she had left. The black evening gown Mia found laid out on her guest room bed a week later seemed to mock her with its elegance and obvious expense. The handwritten note beside it, in Victoria's refined script, offered no opportunity for refusal. "The annual Children's Hospital benefit tonight. Your attendance is expected." "I can't accept this," Mia protested when Victoria entered the room minutes later, the older woman's recovery evident in her graceful movements and the healthy flush in her cheeks. The past week of living under the Cavallari roof had done little to diminish Mia's discomfort with their casual displays of wealth. Victoria dismissed Mia's objection with a gentle but firm smile that brooked no argument. "Consider it practical rather than extravagant. You'll need appropriate attire to blend in at the gala, where you'll be introduced as my new private nurse and companion." The Ritz-Carlton ballroom glittered with San Francisco's elite, the annual benefit drawing together politicians, tech moguls, and old money families in a display of wealth thinly disguised as philanthropy. Mia felt painfully conspicuous despite the designer gown and professionally styled hair that transformed her external appearance. "Remember, you're here as family tonight," Victoria murmured as they entered the event. Her arm linked through Mia's in a gesture that appeared affectionate, but served to guide the younger woman through the unfamiliar social terrain. The implicit protection in the gesture wasn't lost on Mia. Stefano materialized beside them with the silent efficiency that still unnerved Mia after a week in his household, his evening attire accentuating the dangerous elegance that set him apart, even in this gathering of powerful people. His hand settled briefly at the small of her back, ostensibly guiding her but effectively claiming her to the observing crowd. "Play along," he whispered against her ear, as he steered her toward a cluster of men whose expensive suits couldn't disguise their predatory assessments of the room. "These are associates who expect to meet my mother's savior, and possibly her would-be killer." Mia's pulse quickened as understanding dawned. This wasn't merely a social obligation, but a deliberate move in whatever dangerous game the Cavallari family was playing. "You're using me as bait," she accused in a whispered hiss, maintaining her smile for the benefit of watching eyes. "I prefer to think of it as strategic positioning," Stefano countered smoothly, his grip on her waist tightening fractionally as they approached the waiting group. "Watch their reactions when I introduce you. Guilt leaves traces even the most practiced liar can't conceal." The introductions passed in a blur of unfamiliar names and calculating gazes. Mia's nerves stretched to breaking point as she searched for any sign of recognition or hostility among the assembled faces. She found herself leaning into Stefano's solid presence despite her earlier anger, instinctively seeking security in this unfamiliar territory. "May I borrow your lovely companion for a dance?" one of the men asked Stefano after the formalities concluded, his smile not quite reaching eyes that had assessed Mia with uncomfortable intensity throughout the introductions. The predatory edge to his courtesy raised goosebumps along her arms. "I'm afraid Miss Sullivan has promised this dance to me," Stefano replied, with casual authority that concealed the steel beneath his words. Without waiting for a response, he guided Mia toward the dance floor with practiced ease that brooked no opposition. Mia found herself pulled into Stefano's arms as the orchestra began a waltz, his hand splayed possessively across her back as he guided her through steps she'd never learned, but somehow managed to follow under his lead. "That man, August Bianchi, has connections to every criminal enterprise in the city," he informed her, his lips close to her ear under the pretense of intimacy. "Including yours?" Mia challenged, the question slipping out before she could reconsider the wisdom of antagonizing the man currently responsible for her safety. The week spent in the Cavallari household had revealed glimpses of operations that certainly weren't legitimate business ventures. Stefano's laugh held genuine amusement, rather than offense at her boldness. "You're beginning to understand our world, Mia Sullivan," he observed, spinning her gracefully before pulling her closer than strictly necessary for the dance. "Yes, including mine, which is precisely why he's a primary suspect." The morning after the gala, Mia woke to an empty house, the usual bustle of staff notably absent as she made her way through the silent corridors. A single note on the kitchen counter in Stefano's precise handwriting instructed her not to leave the property under any circumstances until his return. Her nursing instincts prickled with unease as she checked Victoria's suite, finding it similarly abandoned with signs of a hasty departure. An open jewelry box, closet doors ajar, and a half-finished cup of tea gone cold on the nightstand. The carefully maintained order of the Cavallari household had been disrupted by something urgent. Mia's phone vibrated with an incoming text from an unknown number. "We have what Cavallari values most. Come alone to Pier 38, Warehouse C. 1 hour. Attached was a photo of Victoria bound to a chair, the timestamp showing it had been taken just 20 minutes ago. Panic clawed at Mia's throat as she tried unsuccessfully to reach Stefano, each unanswered ring increasing her certainty that something had gone catastrophically wrong. The security staff had vanished along with the family, leaving her isolated in the massive house with an impossible decision to make. "This is obviously a trap," she muttered to herself, pacing the marble floors of the entryway while clutching her phone like a lifeline. Yet the image of Victoria, the woman who had welcomed her without question and protected her from unnamed threats, compelled her toward a course of action that defied all logic. 47 minutes later, Mia stood before the weathered exterior of Warehouse C, the sound of lapping waves and distant foghorns creating an eerie soundtrack to what was almost certainly a catastrophic mistake. Her nursing scrubs, the only clothing that felt authentic to her in this situation, offered no protection against the biting wind off the bay, or whatever awaited inside. "Come in, Ms. Sullivan," A voice called from the partially open warehouse door, the casual confidence suggesting they had never doubted her appearance despite the absurdity of their demand. Victoria Cavallari is quite anxious to see you. She's been most insistent about your special medical knowledge. Mia stepped into the cavernous space, momentarily blinded by the transition from bright morning sunlight to the dim interior illuminated only by dusty windows set high in the walls. The echo of her footsteps on concrete announced her presence more effectively than any introduction. As her eyes adjusted, she made out Victoria seated exactly as shown in the photo, flanked by two men whose expensive suits couldn't disguise their mercenary nature. A third man stood slightly apart, August Bianchi from the gala, his predatory smile now unleashed without the social constraints that had tempered it the previous evening. "You came alone. How touching," Bianchi observed, circling Mia like a shark scenting blood in the water. "Such loyalty to a family you barely know. Or perhaps it's something else drawing you to the Cavallaris." Mia ignored him, focusing instead on Victoria, whose composed expression revealed more strength than fear, despite her compromised position. "Are you hurt?" she asked directly, her medical training automatically assessing the visible signs of the older woman's condition. "Nothing serious, dear," Victoria replied with remarkable dignity, her eyes communicating something Mia couldn't quite interpret. "Though I believe Mr. Bianchi has questions about your remarkable ability to identify poisons, a talent that rather spectacularly ruined his careful plans at the opera." Bianchi's pleasant facade hardened as he grabbed Mia's arm, forcing her attention back to him with bruising pressure. "Indeed, a nursing student who miraculously recognizes thallium poisoning and appears with the perfect antidote seems rather suspicious, doesn't it?" "I don't know what you expect me to say," Mia responded, maintaining a calm she didn't feel as she catalogued potential improvised weapons within reach. The warehouse offered little beyond scattered shipping pallets and rusted equipment that had seen better decades. "The truth would be refreshing," Bianchi suggested with mock pleasantness, nodding to one of his men who produced a syringe filled with amber liquid. "Perhaps this will help clarify your memory, a special compound that loosens tongues quite effectively." Mia recognized the distinctive color of sodium pentothal mixed with a paralytic agent, her specialized knowledge once again revealing itself in the most dangerous possible context. "Truth serum with a neuromuscular blocker," she identified automatically, cursing herself immediately as Bianchi's expression transformed with renewed interest. "Fascinating," he murmured, studying her with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a particularly interesting specimen. "You continue to confirm my suspicions about your unusual expertise, Ms. Sullivan. Expertise that extends well beyond standard nursing curriculum." The warehouse door crashed open before Bianchi could pursue his line of questioning further, the sudden intrusion accompanied by the unmistakable sound of gunfire and breaking glass. Mia dropped instinctively to the floor as chaos erupted around her, years of emergency drills in the hospital providing unexpected preparation for the violence. Stefano appeared through the haze of dust and confusion like an avenging angel, his movements fluid and lethal as he dispatched the nearest guard with terrifying efficiency. His eyes found Mia first, a momentary assessment confirming she remained unharmed before he turned his attention to his mother. The Cavallari family doctor finished examining Mia's bruised wrist, pronouncing her physically unharmed despite the morning's traumatic events. The study where he conducted his examination offered no windows to the outside world, reinforcing the sense of isolation that had characterized her past weeks in this household. "You shouldn't have gone to the warehouse," Stefano stated flatly once they were alone, his earlier concern now replaced by cold anger as he paced the perimeter of the room. The controlled violence she had witnessed hours earlier remained evident in the tightly coiled tension of his movements. Mia lifted her chin defiantly, refusing to apologize for attempting to save his mother when she believed he had abandoned them both. "I made the only choice I could with the information I had," she countered, exhaustion making her voice sharper than intended. "A choice that nearly got you killed," Stefano snapped, halting his pacing to fix her with an intensity that would have intimidated her weeks ago. Now, having seen the lengths to which he would go to protect his family, she found herself strangely unmoved by his display of temper. "Your mother could have died while you were... where exactly?" Mia challenged, rising from her chair to confront him directly. "You disappeared without explanation, leaving us vulnerable while you were handling whatever business is more important than family safety." Stefano's expression shifted at her words, something almost like respect flickering across his features before he mastered it. "I was meeting with the heads of the other families, securing their support against Bianchi's attempted coup, he explained with unexpected candor. Other families? You mean other criminal organizations? Mia clarified, no longer pretending ignorance about the nature of the Cavallari enterprise. The weeks spent under their protection had provided ample evidence of activities that existed well outside legal boundaries. Stefano neither confirmed nor denied her assessment, studying her with renewed interest as he considered her directness. "You've shown remarkable adaptability to our world, Mia Sullivan," he observed, using her full name in a way that somehow felt more intimate than casual address would have been. "I've adapted to survive," she corrected him, unwilling to accept his implied approval of her assimilation into their dangerous reality. "But that doesn't mean I belong here, or that I can stay once Victoria no longer needs medical monitoring." Something flashed in Stefano's eyes at her words, disappointment or perhaps challenge, before he closed the distance between them with deliberate steps. "And where exactly do you think you can go that Bianchi won't find you?" he asked, his voice lowered to a dangerous murmur. "He wanted me because of my connection to your family," Mia pointed out logically, refusing to retreat despite his proximity. "Remove that connection, and I become irrelevant to whatever power struggle is happening in your world. Is that what you think happened today?" Stefano asked, genuine curiosity coloring his tone as he studied her with the intensity that still made her heart rate accelerate despite her best efforts at detachment. "That Bianchi targeted you merely as leverage against me?" Confusion flickered across Mia's features as she processed his question, uncertainty replacing her earlier conviction. "Why else would he be interested in a nursing student with no connections or resources?" she asked, genuine bewilderment evident in her voice. "Because you recognized a poison that most medical professionals wouldn't identify without extensive testing," Stefano replied, watching her reaction carefully as he continued. "Because you knew the exact antidote and how to administer it without hesitation or reference materials." Mia felt the blood drain from her face as his implication became clear. Stefano had never stopped investigating her background or questioning her story about toxicology training. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, her throat suddenly dry as the conversation ventured into territory she had carefully avoided for 3 years. "I'm suggesting that Bianchi recognized what I suspected from the beginning," Stefano answered, his gaze never leaving her face as he delivered his theory. "Your knowledge of poisons isn't academic, Mia. It's personal, intimate, and born from experience rather than textbooks." The truth Mia had buried beneath layers of careful fabrication threatened to surface under his relentless scrutiny. Memories of her mother's slow, agonizing death at the hands of a stepfather whose patience had finally run out. 3 years of research, of obsessively learning to identify the poisons that had stolen her mother gradually enough to avoid suspicion, all of it exposed by a chance encounter at an opera house. "My mother was poisoned 3 years ago," Mia finally confessed as dawn broke over the San Francisco skyline, the night spent in painful revelations leaving her emotionally exhausted, but somehow lighter. "My stepfather administered increasing doses of arsenic over months, making it look like a wasting disease while collecting her life insurance." Stefano remained silent beside her on the terrace, offering the rare gift of undivided attention without judgment as she unburdened herself of secrets long held close. The morning light softened his features, revealing a complexity she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge until now. "I couldn't prove it. The autopsy was inconclusive, and he was careful to dispose of evidence," she continued, her fingers absently tracing the pattern of the locket containing her mother's photo. "So I decided to learn everything I could about poisons, determined that I would recognize the signs if I ever encountered them again. And then, you walked into Box 7 and saved my mother from a similar fate," Stefano observed quietly, the coincidence or destiny of their meeting hanging between them unanswered. He reached for her hand, the gesture tentative in a way that seemed at odds with his usual confidence. Victoria found them still on the terrace an hour later, her keen eyes missing nothing about their linked hands or the emotional intimacy evident in their posture. "I see you've finally stopped circling each other like wary predators," she commented with maternal satisfaction, joining them at the railing overlooking the bay. "Mia has shared her story," Stefano explained simply, the loaded statement conveying volumes about newfound trust that Victoria seemed to understand without further elaboration. The unspoken communication between mother and son reminded Mia painfully of what she had lost. "Then, perhaps it's time we share ours completely," Victoria suggested, her gaze shifting to Mia with unexpected vulnerability. "The Cavallari family has existed in shadows for generations, but shadows can provide cover for transformation as well as concealment. Mia listened in growing amazement as Victoria outlined her long-standing efforts to gradually shift the family's interest toward legitimate enterprises, efforts that had earned her powerful enemies within the old guard, including Bianchi. The poisoning had been as much about stopping this evolution as eliminating a powerful matriarch. "My son has been my reluctant ally in this transformation," Victoria explained with obvious pride, her hand resting briefly on Stefano's shoulder. "Each legitimate business we establish reduces our dependence on the old ways, but change comes slowly in our world." Stefano's expression revealed the complex burden he carried, honor-bound to protect the family legacy, while simultaneously working to transform it into something he could eventually take pride in. His eyes sought Mia's, silently gauging her reaction to this revelation. "The medical foundation we're establishing needs a director with your unique combination of medical knowledge and personal conviction," Victoria continued, watching Mia closely as she presented an opportunity that seemed tailored precisely to bridge the chasm between Mia's world and theirs. "A foundation funded by money from illegal operations?" Mia questioned, unable to ignore the moral complexity despite her attraction to both the offer and the man beside her. Her principles had defined her for too long to be casually discarded, regardless of her growing feelings. "Funded by our legitimate holdings, which now represent 60% of our total assets," Stefano clarified, his business acumen evident in the precise figure. "The foundation itself will be completely transparent, subject to the strictest oversight and compliance standards." Mia considered the proposal, weighing the opportunity to create something meaningful from tragedy against the complicated reality of the Cavallari family's dual existence. "I would need complete autonomy in medical decisions," she stated, surprising herself with the implicit acceptance underlying her conditional response. "Absolutely," Victoria agreed without hesitation, a knowing smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she watched understanding develop between Mia and her son. "The foundation will focus on identifying and treating victims of poisoning who might otherwise go undiagnosed, cases like your mother's that slip through conventional medical screening." 3 months later, Mia stood in the lobby of the newly established Sullivan Cavallari Medical Research Center, watching as the plaque bearing her mother's name was unveiled to polite applause from San Francisco's elite. The journey from struggling nursing student to foundation director still felt surreal at times, a transformation as profound as the one the Cavallari family was undergoing. Stefano appeared at her side as the ceremony concluded, his hand finding hers with the easy familiarity that had developed between them during the intense months of planning. "Your mother would be proud," he murmured, understanding the bittersweet nature of this triumph better than anyone else could. "Box 7 at the Golden Gate Opera House has been permanently reserved in your name," Stefano added, as they walked toward the reception, the significance of the location where their worlds had collided not lost on either of them. "Victoria insists we use it for the season opening next month. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying these tales of unexpected love and transformation, write in the comments which part of the world you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is what keeps these stories coming.